You know what it's like coming home after the worst shift of your life, just wanting to see your wife smile? Instead, I find Diana on our front porch, jaw clenched like granite, holding an eviction notice. Bethany called 911, told them we were drug dealers because of all the cop cars, Diana says, her voice ice-cold calm. The sound of crumpled legal documents echoes as she crushes the papers in her fist. When that didn't work, she filed this. Says our police presence violates HOA covenants and we have 30 days to get out. I can smell the fresh pine from our prize-winning garden and the bitter stench of pure injustice. We've lived here 3 years, never missed an HOA payment, helped every neighbor in crisis. Then Diana looks me straight in the eye and says something that makes my stomach drop. Honey, I think it's time Bethany learned who she's really dealing with. What would you do if your HOA tried to evict you? Where are you watching from? My name's Marcus Delacroix, and 3 years ago, I thought I'd found paradise. Small-town patrol officer, beautiful wife Diana, cute 1960s ranch house in Willowbrook where neighbors still wave and kids ride bikes without helmets. Sue me, I'm old-fashioned. Diana and I met at a veterans barbecue. She had this way of listening that made you feel important, and the smell of her vanilla perfume mixed with gun oil should have been my first clue she wasn't your average cop's wife. But when someone looks that good in uniform and slips 20s to homeless vets when she thinks nobody's watching, you don't ask too many questions. Our house sits on a quarter-acre with oak trees older than my grandfather. The previous owners let everything die, but Diana spent months bringing our garden back to life. Now the scent of fresh basil and the sound of bees humming through our tomatoes makes me smile every time I pull in the driveway. Half our harvest feeds the local food bank. Diana's idea, of course. Willowbrook used to be pure blue-collar. Factory workers, mechanics, people who fixed their own cars and minded their own business. Then the gentrification vultures started circling. Enter Bethany Thornfield. Bethany showed up 18 months ago in a white BMW with Housekin vanity plates, because apparently Queen was too subtle. Real estate agent, treats every conversation like a sales pitch, and has this talent for making "How was your weekend?" sound like a property inspection. Within a month, she'd appointed herself HOA president of an HOA that didn't exist. This neighborhood has such potential, she'd say, staring at our house like it personally insulted her mother. The harassment started small. Bethany measuring our grass with an actual ruler. I watched her through our kitchen window, crouched in our yard with a metal ruler like some demented golf caddy. Diana just laughed and said something about small people needing control. Then came the emergency HOA meeting. Bethany, her neighbor Carol, and Carol's husband Bob in Bethany's living room, drafting community standards. Suddenly we had parking restrictions, lawn ornament bans, and visual harmony requirements. The parking rule targeted us specifically. No commercial or government vehicles overnight. My patrol car and Diana's unmarked sedan were apparently destroying neighborhood aesthetics. I started parking 2 blocks away, walking to work in rain that soaked through my uniform shirt and left me smelling like wet wool all day. Diana watched me trudge past our kitchen window and just shook her head. Marcus, honey, pick your battles. That's when Bethany crossed the line. She filed noise complaints about my weekend woodworking. I build furniture for the homeless shelter, beds and dressers, nothing fancy. The sound of my saw and the smell of fresh-cut pine apparently violated quiet enjoyment ordinances. I'll never forget loading my tools into storage, the crunch of gravel under the dolly wheels, wondering how helping homeless veterans became a crime. My neighbor, Mrs. Patterson, 83 years old, grows roses that smell like heaven, watched from her porch with tears in her eyes. That woman's got no soul, Mrs. Patterson said. Your daddy would be proud of what you're doing. But here's what really should have tipped me off. While I was bending over backwards to keep peace, Diana was making calls. Conversations that stopped when I walked in, text messages from people with military titles that made no sense for our 12-person police department. Just work coordination, she'd say, but her tone had that edge I'd heard exactly twice before, once when she talked about Afghanistan, and once when she mentioned why she left the army. After 3 months of this garbage, I was ready to move somewhere less complicated, somewhere neighbors acted normal instead of like property appraisers with personality disorders. I had no idea Diana was building a case file that would make Bethany regret ever setting foot in Willowbrook. 2 weeks after the woodworking incident, Bethany deployed her secret weapon, her brother-in-law Randall Kowalski, County Code Enforcement Officer. This guy showed up at our door looking like he'd crawled out of a gas station bathroom, clipboard in hand, and an attitude that screamed, "I peaked in high school and never got over it." "Ma'am, I'm citing you for unapproved landscaping modifications," he announced, squinting at Diana's vegetable garden like it had personally insulted his entire family lineage. Diana stepped onto our porch, still in her work clothes, and I caught that familiar scent of her soap mixed with something I couldn't quite place, something that always reminded me of quiet authority. "What modifications exactly?" "Garden's got to be 15 feet from the property line, ma'am. You're sitting at 12 feet even." Randall yanked out a measuring tape with the supreme confidence of a man who'd clearly never been challenged on anything in his entire bureaucratic existence. I watched from the kitchen window, my morning coffee turning bitter in my mouth as this pencil-pushing parasite threatened months of Diana's careful work. Our tomatoes were just starting to turn that perfect shade of red, peppers growing fat and green, food that would feed 20 families at the homeless shelter this winter. But Diana just smiled and cracked her knuckles, a habit I'd only seen exactly twice before, both times right before someone learned a very expensive lesson about underestimating my wife. "Officer Kowalski, tell me something. You familiar with municipal food security exemption ordinances?" Randall's measuring tape stopped mid-pull like he'd hit a brick wall. "What's that now?" "Most cities exempt vegetable gardens from standard setback requirements when they actively serve community food banks and homeless shelters. I picked that little nugget up from helping other neighborhoods deal with, shall we say, overzealous enforcement practices. The legal precedent's actually quite solid." The sound of Randall's pen clicking nervously filled the morning air, mixing with the distant hum of lawn mowers and the sweet smell of fresh-cut grass drifting over from our neighbor's perfectly manicured yard. You could practically see the rusty gears grinding away in his head as he tried to figure out whether he was being completely outsmarted by a suburban housewife. 20 minutes later, he slithered back to his county truck empty-handed, muttering something about checking with my superiors and reviewing applicable codes. But I knew Bethany wouldn't quit. People like her double down harder when they start losing ground. That evening, something bothered me about Randall's initial cockiness, so I decided to do some digging. Filed a formal records request through the county clerk's office asking for his complete citation history. What came back 3 days later made my hands literally shake with pure, undiluted rage. 247 total citations written in the past 12 months. 219 of them, that's a staggering 89%, had been written specifically in Willowbrook. For a county covering 12 different townships and probably 50,000 residents, those numbers didn't just suggest targeted harassment. They screamed it louder than Bethany's BMW exhaust on a quiet Sunday morning. "Diana, you need to see this," I said, spreading the official printouts across our kitchen table. The smell of her evening herbal tea mixed with the scent of my growing fury, and the faint aroma of dinner slowly burning on the stove because I was too pissed off to pay proper attention. She studied those numbers like a general reviewing battlefield intelligence reports. Classic selective enforcement pattern. Textbook harassment campaign. "So what exactly do we do about it?" "We document absolutely everything and let them dig their own graves even deeper," she said, making careful notes on her phone with the practiced efficiency of someone clearly used to building airtight legal cases. "Bethany's making this personal now, and personal always makes people sloppy. Sloppy people make fatal mistakes." 3 days later, Bethany called yet another emergency HOA meeting, somehow managing to pack the community center with her hand-picked supporters. Mostly elderly retirees she'd systematically convinced that property values would absolutely skyrocket if we just eliminated all the so-called problem elements from our neighborhood. The meeting room reeked of stale coffee, industrial carpet cleaner, and the nervous sweat of people about to make some seriously bad decisions. 20-something bodies were crammed into folding chairs meant for maybe 12 people max, metal legs squeaking protests under the weight. You could practically taste the thick tension hanging in the recycled air before Bethany even opened her mouth. "The Delacroix property continues flagrantly violating our established community standards," she announced from behind a flimsy folding table that served as her makeshift throne of suburban power. "Therefore, I'm formally proposing a mandatory $500 monthly community enhancement fee to fund proper neighborhood improvements and maintenance." The room absolutely exploded like someone had thrown a live grenade into a henhouse. Mrs. Patterson struggled to her arthritic feet, voice shaking with righteous anger. $500 a month? I'm living on Social Security, you heartless creature. Are you actively trying to starve us all out of our own homes?" That's when Diana stood up, and the entire room went dead silent. The silence after Diana stood up lasted exactly 3 seconds before Bethany steamrolled right over it like a freight train driven by pure stupidity. "Well, regardless," Bethany announced, "I'm partnering with Premier Community Solutions for professional enforcement of our community standards." The name alone sounded like a pyramid scheme had a baby with a protection racket. Within 5 days, our mailbox looked like a paper mill had exploded. Daily violation notices for infractions so petty they needed electron microscopes to detect. Our mailbox sat 2.3 inches too close to the sidewalk instead of the required 24 inches. Diana's navy blue welcome mat with tiny anchors violated earth tone harmony requirements hidden in subsection 47C of Bethany's freshly invented covenant amendments. Even our house numbers, the same brass digits that had been there for 15 years, suddenly violated visual consistency standards. The morning ritual became opening our front door to the crisp sound of expensive paper rustling and the bitter smell of manufactured outrage. Each notice demanded compliance fees ranging from $50 to $200, all stamped with Premier's corporate logo that looked like it was designed by someone who'd never seen actual design work. But Bethany made a crucial mistake. She got greedy, and greedy people leave paper trails. I started digging into Premier's business model while Diana made her morning coffee, the familiar aroma of dark roast mixing with my growing suspicion that something stank worse than last week's garbage. What I found made my jaw drop. These parasites took a 30% commission on every fine they collected. They literally had financial incentive to invent violations, which I remembered from a law enforcement seminar was illegal under Texas consumer protection statutes. It's like paying a referee based on how many penalties he calls. "Diana, look at this contract language," I said, spreading Premier's documents across our kitchen table. "They're basically running a protection racket with legal paperwork." Diana studied the fine print with the focus of a hawk spotting a field mouse. "Extortion with extra steps," she said quietly. "These people just made a very expensive mistake." That afternoon, while I was reorganizing my tool shed and trying not to fantasize about introducing Bethany's face to my sledgehammer, I heard Diana making a phone call through the kitchen window. Her voice carried that crisp, military tone I'd only heard during her nightmares about Afghanistan. "Yes, sir, I understand the jurisdictional concerns. No, the pattern suggests RICO predicate offenses. I'll have the documentation package ready for federal review by Thursday." I walked back inside just as she ended the call with, "Understood, Director. We'll coordinate through the usual channels." "Work stuff?" I asked, trying to sound casual while my brain did backflips trying to figure out what usual channels meant for a small-town cop's wife. "Something like that." Her smile suggested Premier had just stepped in quicksand and didn't know it yet. 3 days later, Derek Stallworth, Premier's regional manager, called our house personally. I put him on speaker while Diana listened from across the room, her expression unreadable as a poker player's. "Mr. Delacroix, there appears to be some confusion about recent citations," Derek said, his voice suddenly nervous as a teenager explaining a dented fender. "We'd like to discuss a mutually beneficial resolution." "What kind of resolution?" I asked, tasting the sweet flavor of watching a bully backpedal. "Well, upon thorough re-examination, your property actually exceeds all applicable community standards. We're prepared to waive all pending fees and, reconsider our entire contract with your HOA management." Diana mouthed something that looked suspiciously like federal investigation, but her face remained stone calm. "That's awfully generous," I said. "What changed your mind so dramatically?" The pause stretched longer than a Texas summer. "Let's just say we received important clarification about proper enforcement procedures from higher regulatory authorities." After Derek hung up, I stared at Diana like she'd just walked on water. "Want to explain what the hell just happened?" "Sometimes bullies need gentle reminders about following actual laws," she said, but there was titanium steel in her voice that made my spine tingle with anticipation. But Bethany wasn't done. That woman had the survival instincts of a lemming with a death wish. 2 days later, she called an emergency city council session to present documented evidence of criminal activity at our address. The council chambers smelled like decades of old wood polish and older political grudges. Bethany had prepared an actual PowerPoint presentation, complete with laser pointer and slide transitions, documenting every suspicious vehicle visiting our property. "Council members," she began, clicking to a photo of Diana's unmarked sedan, I have irrefutable proof of ongoing illegal operations at 1247 Oak Street. Slide 2, my patrol car. Slide 3, a black SUV I didn't recognize. Slide 4, another SUV with government plates. These vehicles arrive at unusual hours, conduct brief meetings, then disperse. Classic drug distribution patterns. My blood pressure spiked, but Diana sat motionless as marble until Bethany clicked to slide 5. A zoomed-in photo of Diana in uniform, focusing on her shoulder insignia like she'd discovered buried treasure. That's when Diana stood up, and I swear every atom in the room suddenly paid attention. "Mrs. Thornfield," Diana said, her voice carrying across the chamber like a judge pronouncing sentence. "Those suspicious vehicles belong to my colleagues from the State Police Criminal Investigation Division. We carpool to joint operations briefings." Bethany's face drained of color faster than water through a broken dam. "And those brief meetings you've documented? Coffee breaks between shifts. You see, investigating organized crime requires coordination between multiple agencies." The laser pointer slipped from Bethany's fingers and clattered across the floor like a gavel announcing her own trial. You'd think watching Bethany's PowerPoint presentation crash and burn would have taught her about picking fights above her weight class. You'd be dead wrong. 2 weeks later, I dragged myself home from the worst shift in recent memory. 3 domestics, a meth lab cleanup, and a high-speed chase that ended with some genius trying to outrun a radio in a Honda Civic. All I wanted was Diana's smile and maybe leftover pizza. Instead, I found her sitting at our kitchen table, staring at her phone with an expression that made my stomach drop like a broken elevator. "What happened?" I asked, catching that sharp, metallic scent that meant Diana was calculating someone's destruction in real time. "Bethany called 911 this morning," Diana said, her voice deadly calm. "Told them you threatened her with your service weapon during a heated confrontation yesterday." The words hit me like a sledgehammer to the chest. "Yesterday I was processing evidence for the Henderson burglary case. I've got 3 witnesses and dashboard cam footage." "I know. The responding officers know. Half the department knows exactly where you were at 2:30 p.m. Diana's fingers drummed against the table with military precision. But they still had to file the report. The sound of her drumming mixed with our refrigerator's hum and the distant noise of kids playing in the street. Normal sounds from a life that suddenly felt like it was balanced on a knife's edge. False police reports don't just disappear. They follow you, haunt your record, poison every future interaction with internal affairs. "There's more," Diana continued. "She's retained Bradford Ashworth as legal counsel." I actually groaned out loud. Every cop in 3 counties knew Big Brad Ashworth, the ambulance chaser who advertised on bus benches with slogans like, "Injured, get paid." The man had been sanctioned by the state bar twice for frivolous litigation and was currently under investigation for misappropriating client funds, which is lawyer speak for theft. "He's threatening a federal civil rights lawsuit," Diana said. Claims were using police authority to intimidate and harass his client through coordinated stalking behavior. I tasted copper and realized I'd been grinding my teeth. Coordinated stalking? We've gone out of our way to avoid this lunatic. That's when Diana's phone buzzed with a call. She glanced at the screen, and something shifted in her posture, like a switch flipping from concerned wife to something much more dangerous. "Excuse me for a moment," she said, stepping onto our back porch. Through the kitchen window, I caught fragments of her conversation, spoken in that crisp tone I'd only heard during her Afghanistan nightmares. Pattern recognition, federal jurisdiction, and authorization to proceed. When she returned, Diana's eyes held a glint I'd never seen before, like a chess grandmaster who'd just seen checkmate in 3 moves. "Marcus, we need to discuss something important about my work situation," she said carefully. "But first, I think we should document this escalation properly." Before I could ask what she meant, our doorbell rang. Through the peephole, I saw Detective Ray Gonzalez from our Criminal Investigation Division, holding a manila folder and looking like he'd rather be getting root canal surgery. "Marcus," Ray said when I opened the door, his voice carrying the weight of uncomfortable duty, "I'm here about the complaint filed against you. Internal Affairs wants you for an interview Monday morning at 0800 hours. The smell of evening rain mixed with Ray's cheap aftershave and the acrid taste of my career potentially circling the drain. Diana appeared beside me, and Ray's expression shifted from uncomfortable to confused. "Evening, Detective," Diana said with professional courtesy. "I assume this involves Mrs. Thornfield's allegations?" "Yes, ma'am. And you are?" Diana smiled with the warmth of winter sunlight. Beautiful, but carrying absolutely no heat. "Someone who's been documenting Mrs. Thornfield's behavior pattern for quite some time now." Ray shifted his weight, clearly sensing undercurrents he couldn't identify. "Ma'am, if you've witnessed any incidents relevant to this investigation—" "Oh, I've witnessed considerably more than incidents, Detective Gonzalez." Diana's voice held notes of authority that made Ray unconsciously straighten his shoulders. "I've documented a systematic harassment campaign that crosses several jurisdictional lines." "Jurisdictional lines?" Ray's eyebrows climbed toward his hairline. "Mrs. Thornfield's false reporting, discriminatory enforcement patterns, and apparent coordination with county officials suggest violations that extend well beyond local police matters." Diana paused, letting that sink in. "Certain federal agencies have expressed interest in reviewing her activities." The silence stretched like taffy, while Ray processed implications he probably didn't want to understand. Outside, Mrs. Patterson's sprinklers kicked on with their familiar whisper, and somewhere down the block, a dog barked at nothing. Normal neighborhood sounds that felt surreal against the backdrop of my life imploding. "Ma'am," Ray said finally, "should I be coordinating this investigation with anyone else?" Diana's smile could have powered our house for a week. "Detective, I think you'll find that coordination has already begun." After Ray left, walking to his car like someone had just explained quantum physics using interpretive dance, Diana closed the door and turned to me with eyes full of secrets. "Marcus," she said, "it's time you learned who you really married." "Sit down, Marcus," Diana said, and something in her voice made every instinct I'd developed as a cop scream that my world was about to change forever. She disappeared into our bedroom closet, the side I never looked in because it was full of work clothes I'd assumed were just really expensive suits. When she returned, she was carrying a wooden box I'd never seen before, mahogany with brass corners and a lock that belonged on a safe. The sound of tumblers clicking open echoed through our kitchen like gunshots. Inside, nestled in military-grade foam, were things that made my brain completely short-circuit. Bronze Star Medal, Meritorious Service Medal, Combat Action Badge, and certificates with seals that looked official enough to hang in the White House. "Lieutenant Colonel Diana Michelle Delacroix, United States Army, retired," she said, sliding her military ID across our kitchen table. The smell of old leather and gun oil rose from the box. "Current assignment, Division Commander, Texas State Police, Criminal Investigation Division." I stared at the ID photo, same face, same eyes, but wearing eagles on her collar that meant she outranked every cop I'd ever met. My coffee had gone cold, but I couldn't taste anything anyway because my mouth felt like it was stuffed with cotton. "You run the state police?" I croaked. "Not all of it, just the division that investigates public corruption, civil rights violations, and organized criminal conspiracies." As Diana's smile held the warmth of Arctic wind. "You know, the division that gets very cranky when small-town bullies weaponize law enforcement against military families." 3 years of marriage, and I'd been living with someone who could probably have the governor on speed dial. I'd been parking 2 blocks away in the rain while my wife commanded the people who investigate corruption at the state level. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because I wanted to be Diana Delacroix, patrol officer's wife who grows tomatoes and makes terrible lasagna." Her expression softened for exactly 3 seconds. "Not Lieutenant Colonel Delacroix who makes grown prosecutors wet themselves during testimony." She pulled out a manila folder thick enough to choke a horse and spread its contents across our table. Police reports, photographs, financial documents, and what looked like surveillance transcripts covered every inch of surface space. "Marcus, Bethany isn't just harassing us. She's been running a systematic campaign to drive out every family that doesn't meet her demographic preferences." Diana's finger traced patterns across the documents. "The Hernandez family, cited for excessive noise because their 10-year-old Corolla apparently sounds too foreign. The Washingtons, threatened with liens because their teenage son's friends loiter suspiciously in their own driveway. Mr. Kim at the corner market, forced to remove non-conforming cultural displays that were actually miniature American flags." The taste of bile rose in my throat as the scope became clear. This wasn't about property values. It was about ethnic cleansing with HOA paperwork. "You've been documenting everything?" Every conversation, every violation notice, every illegal threat cross-referenced and verified. Diana's efficiency was simultaneously terrifying and magnificent. My team's been coordinating with FBI Civil Rights Division, IRS Criminal Investigation, and Justice Department Community Relations. Those phone calls, Director Walsh at FBI, Attorney General Rodriguez, IRS Division Chief Patterson. Diana rattled off names like she was ordering coffee. Plus coordination with DOJ's Hate Crimes Task Force. I picked up her Bronze Star, feeling its weight. Diana, you're not just a cop. You're basically a one-woman federal law enforcement agency. And Bethany just filed false police reports against a federal officer's family while running a racially motivated conspiracy. Diana's laugh sounded like winter breaking. She's committed enough federal felonies to earn a decade in prison. Outside, Mrs. Patterson's wind chimes sang in the evening breeze, such a normal sound for such an abnormal moment. So what happens now? Diana checked her watch and smiled like a predator who'd just spotted wounded prey. Now we let Bethany dig her grave a little deeper while we prepare for the reckoning. The next morning, I walked into our spare bedroom and thought I'd accidentally entered a federal crime lab. Evidence boards covered every wall, red string connecting photographs like a spider web designed by someone with serious organizational issues. The smell of Diana's industrial-strength coffee mixed with the sharp scent of fresh printer ink from what looked like a forest's worth of legal documents. "Holy shit, Diana," I said, staring at a timeline that stretched across 12 feet of wall space. "When did you have time to build this?" "I don't sleep much," she replied, stepping back to admire her work like an artist evaluating a masterpiece. "Plus, I had help." As if summoned by magic, 3 people walked through our front door carrying enough electronic equipment to launch a satellite. Agent Sarah Ellis looked like she could deadlift a Toyota while reciting the Constitution from memory. Mike Rodriguez from the Attorney General's office wore a suit that probably cost more than my truck and moved like someone who'd never lost an argument. Detective Rosa Martinez had fingers that danced across laptop keyboards like she was conducting a digital orchestra. "Marcus," Diana said with the casual tone she might use to introduce neighbors at a barbecue, "meet the people who are going to destroy Bethany's life." Sarah opened her laptop, and our wall-mounted TV exploded with charts that made my head spin faster than a carnival ride. Mrs. Thornfield's activities qualify as federal civil rights violations. When local officials systematically target protected classes, it stops being a neighborhood dispute and becomes our problem. "How does local harassment become federal business?" I asked, genuinely confused by the legal maze. Mike leaned forward, loosening his tie like he was settling in for story time. "Think of it like this. If one restaurant won't serve black customers, that's discrimination. If every restaurant in town coordinates to deny service based on race, that's a conspiracy. Individual incidents are local crimes. Systematic targeting becomes federal civil rights violations." I grabbed that explanation like a drowning man grabbing a life preserver. These weren't random incidents. They were coordinated attacks using legal paperwork as weapons. Rosa pulled up financial documents that made my eyes cross like someone had punched me in the mathematics. Here's where Bethany got greedy. Premier Community Solutions files tax returns claiming enforcement fees as legitimate business expenses while hiding their revenue-sharing deals with local officials. That's tax evasion, money laundering, and potentially organized racketeering. The room fell silent except for the hum of electronic equipment and the distant sound of Mrs. Patterson's sprinklers watering her roses, normal neighborhood sounds that felt surreal against the backdrop of federal crime investigation. "What's our timeline?" Sarah asked, scribbling notes on a legal pad that already looked like ancient hieroglyphics. Diana consulted her phone with the efficiency of someone coordinating military operations. "Bethany's planning something dramatic for next week's HOA meeting. Intelligence suggests she's working with premier and local officials for a coordinated enforcement action, possibly attempting to place liens on multiple properties simultaneously." The pieces clicked together in my brain like a puzzle solving itself. "You're going to let her do it, aren't you? Let her commit more crimes while you document everything?" Diana's smile could have lit up our entire street. "Marcus, in 20 years of law enforcement, I've learned that the best way to catch criminals is letting them think they're winning right up until the moment handcuffs destroy their delusions." Rosa's laptop chimed with incoming messages, and her expression shifted from professional interest to barely contained fury. Cyber forensics just recovered deleted communications between Bethany, Premier executives, and code enforcement Kowalski. They're planning to cite every minority family in Willowbrook simultaneously under emergency health and safety violations. Emergency violations? Mike's eyebrows climbed toward his receding hairline. Let me guess. Violations requiring immediate compliance fees or property seizure? $5,000 per household, payable within 72 hours, or face foreclosure proceedings. Sarah's voice carried the hard edge of someone who'd seen this exact scam destroy communities before. Classic predatory enforcement designed to force panic sales at below-market prices. The scope was breathtaking. Not random harassment, but coordinated financial terrorism disguised as community improvement. Bethany wasn't just a neighborhood bully. She was running a criminal enterprise that happened to use HOA paperwork instead of baseball bats. Media coordination? Diana asked, consulting notes that looked like battle plans. Channel 7's investigative unit is briefed and ready, Mike replied. Plus, State Police Public Information Office will handle post-arrest press conferences. Multiple arrests? My pulse quickened like I'd just spotted a fleeing suspect. Sarah nodded with grim satisfaction. Bethany faces federal civil rights violations, conspiracy, tax evasion, and wire fraud. Premier's executives get RICO charges. Kowalski gets official corruption and deprivation of rights under color of law. Diana walked to our kitchen window, gazing out at the street where children still played and neighbors still trusted each other. The community Bethany was systematically poisoning through bureaucratic warfare. There's something else, she said, her voice taking on that dangerous quiet that made my spine tingle with anticipation. We're not just stopping them. We're making sure this cancer never spreads again. The afternoon sun illuminated evidence that would soon explode across headlines nationwide. In 6 days, our quiet neighborhood would become ground zero for the kind of federal law enforcement operation that makes prosecutors' careers and destroys criminals' lives forever. Over the next 3 days, watching Bethany's slow-motion meltdown was like witnessing a car accident in reverse, horrifying but impossible to look away from. Sunday night around 2 a.m., I was brushing my teeth when Diana hissed from the bedroom window, "Marcus, get over here, now." I rushed over, toothpaste foam still dripping from my chin, to find Bethany crouched beside my truck like some suburban guerrilla warrior. She was spray-painting "corrupt cop" across my driver's side door in letters big enough to read from the International Space Station. The sharp chemical smell of aerosol paint drifted through our screen, mixing with the night air and the scent of her complete mental breakdown. What made this beautiful was Rose's motion-activated cameras capturing everything in 4K resolution. Federal evidence quality footage of Bethany committing felony vandalism while wearing her House Ken vanity plate like a neon sign advertising her identity. "Should I go arrest her?" I whispered, reaching for my radio. "Absolutely not," Diana said, filming backup footage with her phone. "Let her add vandalism to her federal charges. Prosecutors love defendants who keep expanding their own indictments." The next morning, Premier Community Solutions went into full damage control mode. Derek Stallworth called our house at 7 a.m., sounding like someone had just explained his own funeral arrangements in excruciating detail. "Mr. Delacroix," Derek's voice cracked like puberty on steroids, "there seems to be a significant misunderstanding regarding recent enforcement activities in your neighborhood." I put him on speaker while Diana sipped coffee and took notes like she was documenting his confession for posterity. The morning sunlight streaming through our kitchen windows made everything feel almost peaceful, if you ignored the fact we were listening to a man realize his life was over. "What kind of misunderstanding?" I asked, savoring every syllable like fine wine. "Well, upon extensive legal review, it appears our Willowbrook contract may have exceeded appropriate jurisdictional parameters." Corporate panic was pouring out of Derek like water from a broken fire hydrant. "We're prepared to immediately suspend all pending citations, refund collected fees, and terminate our management agreement." Diana's pen moved across her legal pad like she was composing Derek's obituary in real time. "That's awfully generous," I said, tasting the sweet nectar of watching scammers beg for mercy. "What inspired this sudden attack of conscience?" The silence lasted long enough for me to count my own heartbeat. Certain federal regulatory agencies have raised concerns about our operational methodologies. After Derek hung up, Diana looked like a cat who'd just cornered a mouse convention. 3 different agencies recorded that call. Derek just confessed to conspiracy and admitted their entire operation was illegal. But Bethany apparently had the survival instincts of a lemming with a death wish. Tuesday evening, she convened another emergency city council meeting to present what she called definitive proof of deep state infiltration in our neighborhood. The council chambers reeked of desperation and industrial carpet cleaner as Bethany unveiled her masterpiece, a PowerPoint presentation that made QAnon conspiracies look like elementary school book reports. She'd spent her weekend documenting every federal vehicle that had visited our house, complete with license plate numbers, arrival times, and theories that belonged in a psychiatric evaluation. "Council members," she announced, laser pointer trembling like a leaf in a hurricane, "I have irrefutable evidence of coordinated government conspiracy involving multiple agencies in an illegal cover-up operation. Slide 1. Agent Ellis's FBI vehicle labeled Deep State Operative Number 1. Slide 2. Mike Rodriguez's state car, marked Shadow Government Enforcer. Slide 3. Rosa's SUV, identified as Cyber Warfare Command Vehicle." I bit my tongue to keep from laughing as Bethany provided prosecutors with enough stalking evidence to add another felony to her growing collection. These so-called law enforcement officials, Bethany made air quotes that would have been hilarious if they weren't completely insane, are clearly coordinating to silence patriotic Americans who dare expose small-town corruption. The taste of irony was so thick you could have served it for dinner. Diana sat beside me, motionless as marble, occasionally jotting notes while Bethany documented her own federal crimes with the enthusiasm of someone building their own electric chair. Council members exchanged glances that screamed, "How do we escape this meeting without becoming accessories to whatever mental breakdown we're witnessing?" Furthermore, Bethany clicked to her final slide showing our house circled in red like a target. "I demand immediate authorization for independent investigation into the Delacroix organized crime syndicate." The silence stretched like taffy until Diana rose from her chair with the fluid grace of a predator who'd finally decided to end the hunt. "Mrs. Thornfield," Diana said, her voice carrying the authority of someone who'd commanded rooms full of generals, "thank you for so thoroughly documenting my colleagues' visits." Bethany's laser pointer hit the floor with a plastic clatter that echoed through the sudden stillness. "Agent Ellis, Investigator Rodriguez, and Detective Martinez will find your surveillance records quite useful for their federal stalking case." You could literally watch Bethany's brain processing the fact that she'd just presented evidence of her own crimes to a room full of witnesses. If I thought Bethany's PowerPoint presentation marked rock bottom, I severely underestimated her talent for self-destruction. The woman had apparently decided that if she was going down, she'd take the entire concept of rational behavior with her. Wednesday morning, Diana's phone started buzzing with notifications that made her eyebrows climb toward her hairline like they were trying to escape her forehead entirely. "What now?" I asked, pouring coffee and bracing for whatever fresh insanity Bethany had unleashed on the world. "She's gone digital," Diana said, scrolling through her screen with the expression of someone watching a train wreck in slow motion. "Bethany created fake social media profiles to spread rumors about us online. The profiles were masterpieces of suburban paranoia, Willowbrook watchdog, and concerned neighbor 247, posting edited photos of our house with captions like corrupt cops exposed and local police running drug operation from residential address. She'd even photoshopped pictures to make our vegetable garden look like rows of marijuana plants." "Jesus," I muttered, tasting bitter coffee and the metallic flavor of watching someone destroy their own life in real time. Does she realize social media forensics can trace this stuff back to her devices? Diana's smile held all the warmth of winter moonlight. "Rosa's cybercrimes team identified Bethany's IP address within 20 minutes. She just added cyberstalking and defamation to her federal charges." The smell of bacon from Diana's breakfast preparation mixed with the morning air and my growing sense that we were witnessing something unprecedented. A person committing federal crimes faster than investigators could document them. Thursday afternoon brought Premier Community Solutions' complete corporate meltdown. Derek Stallworth called again, but this time he sounded like someone had just explained quantum physics using only interpretive dance and existential dread. "Mr. Delacroix," Derek's voice shook like autumn leaves in a tornado. "Premier Community Solutions is ceasing all operations effective immediately. We're cooperating fully with federal investigators and have terminated our relationship with Mrs. Thornfield." I almost felt sorry for the guy. Almost. Then I remembered all the families they'd terrorized with fraudulent fees and manufactured violations. "What about the refunds you promised?" I asked, watching Diana take notes with the precision of someone building an airtight legal case. "Checks are being processed through our legal department as part of the federal investigation," Derek sounded like he was reading his own corporate obituary. All affected residents will receive full restitution plus statutory damages for unlawful enforcement practices. After that call, Diana made a phone call of her own, brief, professional, and containing phrases like final coordination phase and media synchronization, the kind of call that suggested someone's world was about to explode in spectacular fashion. Friday evening, the local newspaper received an anonymous tip about HOA corruption that sent their investigative team into overdrive. By Saturday morning, Channel 7's news trucks were parked on our street like mechanical vultures waiting for something to die. Reporter Jessica Martinez, no relation to Detective Rosa Martinez, but equally tenacious, knocked on doors throughout Willowbrook, interviewing neighbors about their experiences with Bethany's enforcement regime. The smell of fresh-cut grass and brewing storms filled the air as cameras captured testimonies that painted a picture of systematic harassment spanning months. Mrs. Patterson, bless her heart, provided the most devastating interview. Sitting on her porch surrounded by prize-winning roses, she spoke with the gentle authority of someone who'd taught middle school for 40 years and seen every variety of human nonsense. "That woman tried to force me into a nursing home," Mrs. Patterson told the camera, her voice steady as bedrock. "Said my garden violated weed ordinances and I was too old to maintain property standards. Threatened to have the county declare me incompetent if I didn't sell." The interview footage made my hands shake with rage. Bethany hadn't just targeted minorities. She'd gone after an 83-year-old veteran's widow whose only crime was growing flowers that reminded her of her late husband. Saturday night, Bethany's paranoia reached clinical levels. I was grilling burgers on our back patio when I heard the unmistakable sound of someone rummaging through our garbage. Through our fence slats, I watched Bethany with a flashlight, digging through our trash bags like some demented suburban archaeologist. "What's she looking for?" I whispered to Diana, who was watching from our kitchen window. "Evidence of our criminal conspiracy," Diana replied, photographing Bethany's trash diving expedition with telephoto lens precision. "Rosa's cameras are getting everything. She just added trespassing and theft to her charges. Going through someone's garbage on their property is still stealing." The taste of grilled meat and the scent of charcoal smoke mixed with the surreal atmosphere of watching our neighbor commit crimes in our backyard while federal agents documented every illegal act. Sunday morning, Diana checked her watch with the satisfaction of someone whose master plan was approaching its climax. 24 hours, she said, sipping coffee that smelled like victory and impending justice. 24 hours until what? Until Bethany learns the difference between harassment and federal law enforcement. Diana's smile could have powered our entire neighborhood. Tomorrow's HOA meeting is going to be educational. Monday evening arrived with the kind of electric tension that makes your teeth ache. The community center parking lot looked like a federal law enforcement convention had collided with a neighborhood potluck. Unmarked government vehicles parked between minivans and pickup trucks, while news crews set up equipment like they were preparing to broadcast the Super Bowl. Inside, the meeting room buzzed with nervous energy, and the smell of burnt coffee from a machine that should have been retired during the Clinton administration. Folding chairs squeaked under the weight of the biggest crowd in Willowbrook HOA history. Curious neighbors, federal agents trying to look casual, and reporters with cameras that cost more than my annual salary. Bethany entered like she was walking onto a battlefield where she'd already won the war. She wore her best power suit and carried a briefcase that probably contained enough delusion to fuel a small aircraft. The woman had no idea she was about to become the star of her own federal takedown. "Ladies and gentlemen," Bethany announced from behind her makeshift podium, "tonight we finally address the criminal conspiracy that has infiltrated our peaceful community." I caught Diana's eye across the room. She sat with Agent Ellis and Mike Rodriguez in the back row, looking like faculty advisors at a debate tournament they already knew the outcome of. The taste of anticipation mixed with the metallic scent of justice about to be served. "For months, I've documented evidence of illegal activities at 1247 Oak Street," Bethany continued, clicking through her latest PowerPoint masterpiece. "Drug trafficking disguised as police work, federal agents conducting illegal surveillance, and a conspiracy to silence concerned citizens who dare speak truth to power." Mrs. Patterson raised her arthritic hand from the front row. "Bethany, dear, those are Diana's work colleagues. They investigate real criminals, not people who grow tomatoes." "Mrs. Patterson, you've been manipulated by sophisticated psychological operations," Bethany replied with the confidence of someone completely detached from reality. But tonight, we expose the truth. That's when Diana stood up, and the entire room went silent like someone had hit a cosmic mute button. "Mrs. Thornfield," Diana said, her voice carrying the authority of someone used to addressing federal courtrooms. "Before you continue, I should probably introduce myself properly." She walked to the front of the room with the fluid confidence of someone who'd commanded military operations in combat zones. The sound of her shoes on linoleum echoed like a countdown timer reaching 0. "I'm Lieutenant Colonel Diana Delacroix, commander of the Texas State Police Criminal Investigation Division." Diana's voice filled the room without strain. "For the past 6 months, my team has been investigating systematic civil rights violations, financial fraud, and conspiracy charges related to HOA enforcement activities in this neighborhood." The color drained from Bethany's face like someone had pulled a cosmic plug. Her laser pointer slipped from fingers that suddenly couldn't grip anything solid, clattering to the floor with the sound of dreams dying. "Those suspicious federal vehicles you've been photographing belong to FBI agent Sarah Ellis, State Attorney General Investigator Mike Rodriguez, and Detective Lieutenant Rosa Martinez from Cyber Crimes." Diana gestured toward the back of the room where her colleagues sat with expressions of professional satisfaction. "Agent Ellis," Diana continued, "would you like to address Mrs. Thornfield's concerns about our activities?" Sarah stood with the fluid grace of someone who'd spent years arresting people who thought they were untouchable. "Mrs. Thornfield, you're under arrest for conspiracy to violate civil rights under Title 18, Section 242 of the Federal Criminal Code." The room erupted like someone had thrown a grenade into a henhouse. Cameras flashed as Sarah read Miranda rights to a woman who 20 seconds earlier had been lecturing federal agents about their own investigation. The smell of sweat and shock filled the air while neighbors who'd been terrorized for months watched their tormentor finally face justice. "You have the right to remain silent," Sarah continued while Bethany stood frozen in disbelief. "Anything you say can and will be used against you in federal court." But the real kicker came when Mike Rodriguez approached the podium with a warrant that looked official enough to frame. "Mrs. Thornfield, you're also facing charges of tax evasion, wire fraud, cyber stalking, and conspiracy to commit extortion." Mike's voice carried the satisfaction of a prosecutor who'd just landed the case of a lifetime. Premier Community Solutions executives Derek Stallworth and Regional Director Patricia Klein are being arrested simultaneously at their corporate headquarters. The community center had become ground zero for federal justice, with news cameras capturing every moment of Bethany's world imploding in spectacular high-definition color. As handcuffs clicked shut around Bethany's wrists, Diana delivered the line that would become local legend. "Ma'am, you called 911 to report suspicious police activity in your neighborhood. I am the police activity in your neighborhood." The silence that followed was broken only by the sound of camera shutters, and Mrs. Patterson's delighted laughter echoing through a room where justice had finally, decisively, hilariously won. Outside, Channel 7's Jessica Martinez was already broadcasting live updates about the federal arrests that would make Willowbrook famous for all the right reasons. 6 months later, our neighborhood looked like someone had lifted a curse that had been poisoning everything for years. Bethany pleaded guilty to 14 federal charges and received 18 months in federal prison, plus 3 years supervised probation and full restitution to every family she'd harassed. Her precious BMW got repossessed to help pay damages, and her real estate license became as extinct as her credibility. Last I heard, she was living in a studio apartment in Amarillo, working at a call center, and probably fantasizing about the good old days when she thought she ruled Willowbrook. Premier Community Solutions dissolved faster than sugar in rainwater. Derek Stallworth got 15 months in federal prison and a lifetime ban from HOA management. Their corporate assets were liquidated to pay restitution, which meant every affected family received checks that actually helped repair the financial damage these parasites had inflicted. Code Enforcement Officer Randall Kowalski lost his job, his pension, and his freedom. 12 months in county lockup for official corruption and civil rights violations. The county had to review and dismiss nearly 300 citations he'd written, costing taxpayers enough money to fund a small city's budget. But the real victory wasn't watching our enemies get their comeuppance, though I'll admit that part was pretty satisfying. The real victory was what happened to our community afterward. Mrs. Patterson's Rose Garden became the centerpiece of Willowbrook's first annual Unity Day Festival, a celebration that raises funds for military family scholarships and community legal aid. The smell of barbecue smoke and blooming flowers now fills our streets every September, along with the laughter of children from every background playing together on new playground equipment bought with recovered HOA funds. I got promoted to sergeant and now run our department's community policing division, specializing in HOA dispute resolution and civil rights protection. Turns out, surviving federal-level harassment gives you unique qualifications for helping other families navigate similar nightmares. Diana's case became a textbook example in law enforcement academies nationwide, how patience, proper documentation, and federal coordination can dismantle even sophisticated criminal conspiracies. Diana established the Texas Suburban Civil Rights Initiative, a statewide program that trains local police departments to recognize and investigate HOA abuse patterns. She travels across Texas teaching officers how suburban harassment often masks deeper civil rights violations, and her work has prevented dozens of communities from suffering Willowbrook's nightmare. Our marriage got stronger through the whole ordeal, if that's even possible. Watching my wife systematically dismantle a criminal conspiracy while maintaining perfect professional composure was like discovering I'd married a superhero who specialized in bureaucratic justice. She still grows the best tomatoes in 3 counties, though now our garden feeds twice as many families through the expanded food bank program. The neighborhood itself underwent a beautiful transformation. The Hernandez family, who'd been targeted for excessive noise because their kids played outside, now hosts weekly block parties where the whole street comes together. Mr. Kim's Corner Market became our unofficial community center, where neighbors gather for coffee and the kind of conversations that build real connections. We established new HOA bylaws requiring unanimous consent for major changes, financial transparency, and an appeals process that actually protects residents instead of persecuting them. Every household gets voting rights, every decision gets documented, and every penny gets accounted for publicly. The legal precedent Diana's case established led to the Texas legislature passing the HOA Accountability Act, requiring statewide oversight of community management companies and criminal background checks for anyone seeking HOA leadership positions. It's now illegal in Texas for management companies to take commission percentages from fines, and residents have new legal protections against discriminatory enforcement. Last Sunday, Diana and I hosted our monthly neighborhood barbecue in the backyard where this whole nightmare began. The smell of grilled burgers mixed with Mrs. Patterson's apple pie cooling on our picnic table, furniture I'd built using tools that Bethany once tried to ban as noise violations, and kids played on the swing set I'd constructed from recovered HOA funds, while their parents shared stories and laughter that proved community healing is possible when justice finally wins. As the sun set over Willowbrook, painting our quiet street in golden light, Diana squeezed my hand and smiled with the satisfaction of someone who'd turned a personal attack into a community victory. "You know what, Marcus?" she said, watching neighbors from every background enjoying peace together. "Sometimes the best revenge isn't getting even. It's making sure the bully's victims get to live better lives than anyone thought possible." Share your own HOA nightmare story in the comments below. Let's build a database of abuse patterns so other communities can recognize and fight back against harassment. And don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell because next week we're covering Landlord Tried to Evict Veteran for Service Dog, Didn't Know About Federal Housing Laws. Trust me, you won't want to miss that justice-serving spectacular.